What is up, guys? My name is Nick. I am a trading performance coach, and today I am making a pretty long video on how to resolve your trading fear and anxiety. I will say before we get into this that you can use this technique on any mental game issue, psychology issue in trading you're having. I focused more on anxiety just to give it a little bit, give the technique a little bit more substance. I will make others on FOMO, revenge trading, etc. in the future. If you're new here, make sure you like and subscribe. It really helps me out, and I put out a lot of videos like this that are going to really help your trading. So I'm going to jump into it. This one might be a little bit longer, but it's going to be a lot of value. So make sure you stick all the way through to the end because there's a lot of really important stuff in here. So first of all, I'm just going to quickly have a look at some of the main causes of anxiety in trading. And these are often going to be around things like fear of losing, fear of being wrong, fear of losing a certain amount, being uncertain of your edge. But what you'll often find is, regardless of which one of these or anything else that you suffer with anxiety with in trading, there is always going to be an overarching fear of something bigger. So fear of losing could be tied to the fear of blowing your account. So that could be the same, losing a certain amount. Maybe you're afraid to lose 10% of your account on one trade because you've decided I'm going to size up massively, or maybe you're taking a prop firm challenge and you're being very aggressive with the size, and that loss is actually going to be a very large sum of your account. It could also be an element of fear of just being an overall failure. If you've spent the last 2 years trading without much success, you've got that sort of emotional hangover. You know what it feels like to keep on taking losses. So you're not scared necessarily of taking this exact loss. You're scared of that previous feeling that you have had. And of course, if you're uncertain of your edge, then every trade you take, you're going to be a little bit anxious. You're not going to be sure, is this profitable or not? So again, there's that element of, I don't know if this is actually going to make me money or not. And the key to resolving any mental game issue is to understand that bigger thing, because that's what you're going to have to tackle with. Now, in this video, we're going to focus a lot on Jared Tendler's methods. I would highly recommend, if you haven't already done so, to get his book, The Mental Game of Trading. I was really fortunate enough to work with Jared on this book, and, well, I say worked with him, he helped my trading significantly and used me as a very small case study. Towards the end of the book, I think I'm in there. It was an amazing experience working with Jared, and the information in this book is absolutely game-changing for traders. I really like Mark Douglas and his approach in the past. This is a step up. If you've used Mark Douglas's ideas in the past, that's great. This tells you how to implement a lot of the things that he talks about, which I think is a game changer, like I said, for trading. I'm also going to put a link down below to the worksheets that Jared has on his website, because a lot of what we're going to be doing here, he has worksheets for that. You can download, you can write them out by hand, you can write them out in a Word document. It's easier if you've got them there to be able to go through them, or you can make your own. I'll put the links down below, so if you want to follow along, which I'd highly encourage you to, either get that or do it on your own. So I first want to sort of take a step back and look at how mental game weaknesses work. Essentially here we have a trading situation. This down here, this is what happens in trading. Okay, this is the specific situation trigger. So with anxiety, it might be a case of your trade is giving you a trigger to get in, and it's got a slightly wider stop than normal. That is a specific situation trigger. What then happens is you have a situation specific reaction or response, which is mostly comprised of that initial thought of, oh, I don't want to take this trade because I might take a bigger loss, or I'm not certain that this is setting up correctly. Now, those thoughts don't just come out of nowhere. They are dictated and fed by your chimp. And this is what the overarching weakness, sort of like the lifestyle thought, this is what causes your mental game issues. So if you have an overarching fear of having losses, right, you don't want to have that losing feeling again. That's how your chimp is sort of running things. it's going to be kind of sending off blinking lights all the time. When the situation occurs, you're going to kind of, your computer part of the brain's going to go, what's my response? And the chimp very quickly goes, we don't want to take a loss. And as a result, you're going to be looking for any reason to not take a trade in that example. And as a result, those thoughts then lead to an emotional response, which comes out as anxiety or fear. Like I said, you can use this in any mental game issue you like. And what a lot of people do is they just go straight to the emotional response and go, just take the trade. Okay? Or they'll maybe go to the situation specific thoughts and reactions and go, right, don't think about those, think these positive things. Now the problem is I've made the chimp box here bigger on purpose because this is the overarching way that you live. This is like your guiding stone in trading. In life, this is, you know not to do something wrong, assume you're a good person. Okay, you see someone crossing the street and you're driving your car, you're not going to run them down, right? Your overarching response is going to be stop, I don't want to hit this person. Even if you're running late for something, even if they shouldn't have been walking across the road at that point, you're not going to hit them. That's your overarching, human response in that situation. Your chimp is, I don't want to hit this person, I don't want to hurt them, I don't want to potentially kill them, get myself in trouble and ruin their life. As a result, the situation happens, the thoughts are dictated by that chimp, that side of you, you stop the car. In trading, often those thoughts are negative, or in a lot of instances they're negative. So instead, to change this whole outcome, we need to change the overarching thought process, and this needs to be a positive thoughts. Now the difficult thing is this has to be stronger than the chimp, and we're going to get into this a lot more, but this just gives you an idea of if you change the overall thought process that you have, that you live by, that means when that situation comes up and you have those thoughts, they're being fed by the positive, correct thoughts that you should be having in that moment, which then leads to the correct response. So our goal is to change this part of us, our chimp, and make that the human, if you like, or a very beneficial chimp, I suppose. So this is what we're going to be doing. Now, what is causing your anxiety? And this is the part where I would very much suggest you get a pen and paper out or have a document open, because this is your kind of bit. You need to start by looking small, right? Look for the specific times, the specific trades, the specific situations for when you feel that anxiety. Does it happen when you've just taken a loss and all of a sudden you're scared of taking another loss, right? Does it happen before you've even taken a trade? Does it happen before the day even starts out, right? When does it happen? What are those thoughts that you have alongside the anxiety? If you aren't certain of your strategy, are the trigger might be, okay, I've got a potential setup here, and the thoughts are, I don't know if this is going to work. I don't like the look of this, even though you know that your strategy doesn't care what it looks like. Okay, what are the thoughts around it? And try to just begin to build up a picture or like a snapshot of what you look like in that moment, what you feel like, and what your actions look like. Are you starting to, bounce up and down a little bit? Are you, shaking your foot around? Are you looking back and forth, trying to find some information that will tell you whether you should or shouldn't take the trade? All of these sort of clues that, like I said, I'd say pause the video and write them all down, are going to begin helping you understand what your trigger is and why it is there. And once you have those down, you want to begin looking bigger. Are those thoughts related to something else, right? So if you are fearful of, say, taking a loss, those thoughts that you're having, does one of them stand out and you go, you know what? That thought there of, I don't want to take another loss because I've already had 6 losses this week and I'm down on my account and I feel really bad about it. Okay, that right there is the big picture. That is what is impacting your decisions, right? So you need to try to find those 1, 2, maybe 3 thoughts that really are like flashing lights that are really saying there's something bigger going on here. And I've just put a few things here, and it could be to do with money, right? Maybe you're trading and you're just looking at the dollar signs the whole time, like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm down $200 on this trade. I can't believe I let a $100 winner turn into a $300 loss, or whatever it is. Is it something to do with success and failure? Are you so used to failing as a trader over the past year, 2 years, 3 years, that you know what it feels like and you don't want to go back to that? Or is it uncertainty? You don't know your strategy inside out, and therefore when you're taking this trade, it's a bit of a guess, and therefore you don't have full conviction in it. Find what that bigger picture is. Find what the chimp is actually scared of, and then we can begin working forward. Now you need to, once you have this overarching reason, you need to know why it makes sense. We never, as human beings, think, feel, or do something for no reason. Now that reason doesn't have to be a good reason, but there is always going to be a reason behind it. So you need to now look at that overarching weakness, if you like, and ask yourself, why does it make sense? Why is it okay to feel anxious, to feel fear, to feel whatever it is that you feel in those moments? And it's absolutely critical to answer this honestly. With the clients that I've worked with, I can tell when they are answering this truthfully and honestly, because I get the feeling that they're starting to squirm a little bit because they feel uncomfortable that they have these thoughts, and it makes sense to have these thoughts because they know when you're doing this right now, when I'm speaking to clients, we're very much logical humans in control. And all of a sudden, we're looking at a very emotional chimp, and we know that it has a reason, and we kind of agree that the reason makes sense, and it feels horrible to our human that we do so. So when you feel that moment of, I know I shouldn't really think like this, but this is actually the truth, that is the point where you have actually made a major step, because that's kind of like the reason the chimp feels that way. And as I said, that reason that it makes sense, that's what controls your response. And then it happens as soon as the emotion spikes. The scary thing is, the chimp could have been developed when you were a very, very small child, and it has been strengthened through things you've learned at school, things your parents have taught you, things your friends have taught you, and now it's come out in trading, and it's very embedded and very, very strong. And you need to sometimes look back almost at your childhood and realize, what I've been living by, these thoughts I've been having, it makes sense, but I kind of know they don't. Now, I want to just again pause from that sort of process and talk about how your chimp takes over, because I think it's pretty important to understand this before we begin to look at how to resolve it. So I like to see the brain as 3 levels. You've got the high level, which is the zone. This is when the market almost feels like the Matrix, where I feel this when I'm walking around sometimes, and I feel like I'm just flowing. You know, I feel like I'm almost gliding around everywhere. And maybe when I'm trading, things feel in slow motion. I know exactly when I need to get in. I know the exact pattern I'm looking for. And everything just feels perfect. I don't even have to think, right? It just happens, and I can just sort of that sort of feeling. Some people describe it where they are the market. They feel the market. That is when you're in level 3. This is your subconscious pulling in every piece of information that it has taken in over the last few months, few years, and putting it to best effect. This is where you ideally want to be. However, it's pretty difficult to be there consistently. Level 2 is your human thinking. You might have heard the concept of conscious competence, unconscious competence, all of that. This is essentially that top level is the stuff that you don't have to, is the stuff that you're not yet aware that you know, but you kind of know it, you can't explain it yet. Level 2 is all the stuff that not only do you understand, but you can explain it, but you have to actively think about it. It has not yet got to that point where you don't have to think about it and it just happens, right? This is when someone is learning to drive a car, they have to be thinking a lot about how much they're pushing on the accelerator, when to brake, when to indicate, when to look in their mirrors. If they're driving manual, when to change gear, right? That overload of thinking is happening in this part of the brain. And in trading, this is essentially everything that you are having to, say you've learned something slightly new about your strategy, you have to really think about it. And this is where most of our knowledge is stored. And especially if you keep jumping from strategy to strategy, this is where all of your knowledge is going to be stored. So it's a pretty important part of your brain. And then your lowest level, level 1, is essentially the chimp habitat. This is the stuff where you don't have to think about because you do it automatically. Unfortunately, a lot of the processes in this part of your brain are controlled by the chimp, and often they're going to be fight, flight, or freeze. They're going to be maybe emotional. This is when somebody gets into an argument for the sake of getting into an argument, and you can tell they're used to being in arguments. They shout, they scream, they react negatively. The smallest thing. That is their chimp, likes to argue. It feels like they need to put their point across, and anybody who says otherwise isn't worth their time. And in trading, this is where those fears tend to live. Now, what happens is as your emotion or your fatigue grows to even a 2 out of 10, you're going to lose access to that top level. And what this kind of looks and feels like is all of a sudden you're having to work just that little bit harder. You're having to maybe fight some of those early thoughts that your chimp begins to have. Okay, because as we'll look later on, as your emotion builds, your chimp builds in strength. And because you're having to fight it a little bit, your brain actually turns off that zone subconscious kind of level because it doesn't need it. It needs to think and it needs to react. Now, as the emotion or fatigue grows to 5 out of 10 or more, you lose access to the human part of your brain. Now, fortunately, this doesn't just all shut off in a moment. It does shut off gradually. But I tend to find that 6, 7, 8 out of 10, this is turned off completely. And a 5 out of 10 is when I begin losing a lot of access to it. And what this feels like is when you can't work through a very small problem with ease. So, before you're able to be like, well, I've got a 2-point risk. I need to take X number of shares or X number of contracts to be in my 2% risk per trade. And you can do that very quickly and easily. All of a sudden the emotion builds and it's difficult to figure out exactly the size you need to take. Something that normally would be pretty straightforward, you have to think about it and you can't. You're also starting to fight against your chimp. It's saying things that it's a lot stronger. Those fears that you have are starting to come out. Maybe it's frustrations are coming out, but you begin to lose access to all the things that you've learned recently. And I saw this in myself just the other week, where I'd added a very subtle new rule to my strategy and I did not implement it for 3 days straight. And I was like, what is going on here? And when I looked, I realized that my emotion was kind of reaching a 4, maybe a 5 out of 10 because of some results I'd had. And as a result, I wasn't able to implement it because that was a part I really needed to think about. Now, as you can see, level 1 remains, and the more emotional you get, the more the chimp takes over, the more powerful it becomes, and those thoughts that we don't want to have really take over. And that reason why the anxiety is fine, that becomes a very strong thought. And you're going to feel that, and it gets to a point where you don't just believe it, it's 100% you. Your human cannot fight back. So how can you start resolving? This is really what you all want to know, but it is important to understand all those bits beforehand. And it comes in 3 steps. I think I put 3 steps. Step 1 is replacing your chimp. So you need to look at that reason that you had, that it's okay to feel the anxiety. Why is that reason toxic to your trading? And you don't here want to target the problem. You don't simply want to say, well, I shouldn't be fearful because of this. That specific reason that you had, that bit where you squirmed because you all of a sudden realize, I shouldn't be thinking this, but I do, and I believe in it. Target that specific thought process. If you have a line that you have written down that just jumps out to you and goes, I cannot believe that I really think like this, but I genuinely do. That is the target you need. That is the problem you need to target. Okay? You need to really shine a light on why your chimp is hurting your trading with that belief. Okay? It's not, why is fear bad? Obviously fear is bad. Why is the specific reason that your chimp thinks that that anxiety is okay? Why is that toxic to your trading? Once you have that, you can begin to plan the correct response. Now, again, this is the correct response to that reason. So we've just written down, or you should have just written down, what that overarching response is, that reason as to why it's okay to be anxiety. Why is that so toxic? Well, what is the correct response to that? When your chimp begins to say that and feed it into you, what is the correct response to that exact reason? And this needs to, and you'll find that you need to build this up over time. The first thing you write down probably won't be strong enough. This needs to be what your chimp lives by. It needs to make more sense than your current chimp, so that when you're a 5 out of 10 emotion, you can throw this piece of logic at it and the chimp cannot argue because it makes more sense than what the chimp is actually saying. Okay? Now, obviously, the chimp is inside you. You need to essentially have a piece of logic here that just trumps what you currently think of. And this is exactly why things like just take the trade or don't give in to FOMO don't work, because they are not stronger. Those phrases are nowhere near strong enough to stop your emotional chimp from taking over and having that thought, which, as we saw in those diagrams before, leads to sort of like it controls your thought process, right? That diagram we had all the way back here. Those little quotes, just take the trade, don't give in to FOMO. That is no way near strong enough to stop the overarching chimp from controlling your specific thoughts and reactions to a trade. A few example ideas. Now, this is something individual you have to do, but just to sort of like, if you're really stuck, these are some little ideas you can work off of. So if it's about losing, I like to look at losses as I'm actually happy to take a loss because I can learn a lot from it, which will make me better in the future. So now that fear of taking a loss, I don't want to feel like a failure. Well, if I take a loss, I can learn from it and become better, which means I won't be a failure. Okay, that is stronger than I don't want to be a failure, potentially. Okay, it has to be individual. If it's losing a big sum, try to look at it and go, I am risking just 1% of my account. The emphasis on the just. So if the chimp begins going, I don't want to lose $200 in this trade, you can go, I'm only risking 1%. It's only 1%. Try to really make it stronger than the chimp's way of looking at things. And then being uncertain, something along the lines of, I'm taking the trades my strategy tells me to, so I can learn more about it and just test how well it performs to gather more data. And all of a sudden, I'm not sure if it works, well, that doesn't matter because I'm going to take it so I can learn more about it. So what you're trying to do is you're not trying to, you've got anxiety and attack the anxiety directly. You're trying to attack the chimp's logic, the chimp's response, what that sort of like, it's okay to feel anxiety because of this. You're trying to replace that and say, well, hang on. Not only is it not okay, it's actually better to look at it in this way. And when you're able to do that, over time, and I'm going to emphasize over time, your chimp will begin to listen more and more to this new piece of logic. Now, just as important, if not more important, you need to write down why this response is correct. You need to be able to reinforce this. If the chimp goes, I don't care about that because I feel like this, you need to be able to come back and go, well, actually, this is the correct response because of this. Okay? And like I said, it needs to be stronger than the chimp's argument because the chimp has to accept it. Your emotional part of your brain needs to be able to agree with this. Otherwise, you're going to have a constant battle. And as soon as you reach a 5 out of 10, 6 out of 10 emotion, the chimp is going to just slam the human to the ground and say, I'm in control again. Whereas if you can work with it and you can get to a point where emotionally, that very emotional, that raw emotional part of your brain agrees with this, it becomes a lot easier to have that sort of fight, that balance and control the thought process, even when you become slightly more emotional. Now, stage 2, or step 2. I've gone step 1, stage 2. Fine. Strengthen your awareness. Now, you need to know when you're starting to slip into your emotional state. There's no point having all of this, prepared, and you don't use it because you didn't see the signs that you become emotional. So you need to just need to get good at when you start slipping into your emotional state, you need to be able to quickly react to it. When you're a 3 out of 10 emotion, that can quite easily be recovered. You know, that line you've written down, those couple of lines, you can read them out at that point, and 3 out of 10 can melt away to a 1 out of 10 quite easily. The chimp is pretty calm at that point. An 8 out of 10, not so much, because remember, your chimp grows in strength as your emotion grows. So at 8 out of 10, your little piece of logic to the chimp, which is now absolutely huge and in full control, is going to do nothing. The resolution that you've written down might right now be a 5 out of 10 chimp, but not a 7 out of 10 chimp. And that is the critical part of this. Catch it before it becomes a serious problem. If every day at a 3 out of 10 you catch it and bring it down to a 1, then you won't have the problem again. That's an ideal world. Maybe one day you cannot get it back from a 3 out of 10. Maybe you're a little bit more tired. It gets to a 5 out of 10. Can you still do it then? Because I can tell you now from experience, when you get to a 7 out of 10, an 8 out of 10, you're not recovering it. So to do this, you need to create an anxiety profile. And on the next slide, I'm going to show you an example of a FOMO profile I created. You can also, again, visit jaredtendler.com/worksheets, and I'll put the link in the description down below. You can download all of these. They're super helpful so that you haven't got to think about it. You just fill it in essentially. And the way they work is you do a 1 to 10 on your thoughts and feelings. So what do you feel out? What are your thoughts at a 1 out of 10, your ideal? What about a 3 out of 10? What about a 5 out of 10? What about a 7 out of 10? A 9 out of 10? And you want to build this up so that maybe today you can do 1, 2, 4, 6, and 8, but you can't do the others. Over the next 2 weeks, you want to fill it in as much as you can. And what you'll find is that you'll have a situation will come up and your anxiety will spike, and you'll have a certain thought that you haven't written down before, and you'll go, oh, where am I at? I feel like I'm at 4 out of 10 right now. That's a new thought, so you can add it in there. And essentially, you're just trying to build up a profile of yourself so you can at any point go, I'm a 3 out of 10, I'm a 6 out of 10, I'm a 2 out of 10. And having this is a pretty powerful tool, because when you become simply aware of it, sometimes that can actually be enough to start melting that emotion away. You also want to do the same for your actions. Sometimes the thoughts and feelings can become a little bit muddled, and instead you catch yourself at a 4 out of 10 beginning to jiggle your foot up and down uncontrollably. Now you're a 4 out of 10. You don't have to worry so much about the thoughts and feelings. That's told you. Maybe a 3 out of 10, you're starting to look for more and more reasons as to why you should or shouldn't take a trade. Maybe at a 7 out of 10, you've frozen up and you can't take the trade. You keep telling yourself, just take it, but you literally cannot take it. And as I said, build this out over the coming weeks. You know, right now you might have a 1, 3, 5, and 7. In 2 weeks' time, you might have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, or whatever it would be. The more detail in this, the easier it is to see where you're at, and the better you become at recognizing it. And have this next to you when you trade. And I suggest to set a timer. You know, I played poker professionally. I would do this every 20 minutes. I set a timer, it would go off, and I would very quickly look down and be like, okay, what are my thoughts and feelings? And I would have, in that instance, I should have my A game, my B game, my C game, but it's the same thing. I'm thinking this, oh, I'm a 3 out of 10 in my anxiety. Okay, I need to take a moment to start resolving it. Or you can also, or as well as, get good at recognizing where you're at any given moment. So just get good at what does a 4 out of 10 trigger look and feel like. Maybe there's a particular number that really stands out as the turning point for you. Get very, very clear as to what that looks, feels, and acts like. Because that way, the moment you think a certain thought, you can go, I'm a 4 out of 10, this is where I need to make my stand. And I think it's really helpful to also list the triggers so you can identify those critical moments. If you know that you feel anxiety immediately after taking a loss and another trade sets up, you can, before you even have those bad thoughts, you know, okay, this is a weak spot of mine, this is a potential trigger, I need to be ready for it. So as I said, this is just an example. This is my FOMO profile. As you can see here, I've got some quick notes, the logic that I'd be injecting. This is quite old, so I'm not going to go through it, but you can see 1 out of 10, starting to feel impatient to take a trade. 2 out of 10, begin to feel jumpy. 3 out of 10, half setup. 4 out of 10. And this line I've put here, essentially for me, the way I like to do it is 5 out of 10 is where I make mistakes. So 4 out of 10, I've got all the thoughts, but I'm not yet making mistakes. 5 out of 10, I'm listening to the chimp. The chimp is starting to take over. So my goal is always, my personal way of doing it at least, is to always keep it below a 5. And if it gets to a 5, that's like the critical, maybe don't trade anymore kind of thing. And then down here, I've just got the triggers as well. And on the side here, I've got technical changes. This is what you begin doing. So, a 3 out of 10, for example, I begin to consider more and more the point of entry rather than looking for my edge. At a 5 out of 10, I'm taking trades. At a 7 out of 10, I'm off plan. So therefore, I get lost in whatever is good. You probably want to go a little bit more along the lines of, I'm starting to draw lines that I shouldn't do. I'm starting to look at indicators I don't normally do. Okay, that's what the actions want to look like. And finally, stage 3, implement over and over and over again. You need to have that replacement for your chimp, your chimp's replacement, I think is a good way of putting it, in front of you at all times. You need to have that new piece of logic ready so that you can use it to keep your chimp in check. Before you trade, as part of your warm-up, read through the new belief system, why it's correct, and make sure you live by it. If you have a certain line, and this is why it takes 3 or 4 goes at this sometimes, if you have a certain line that you read through and you go, that doesn't just make sense, I can live by that, and that is me. When you get to that stage, your chimp is going to find it incredibly difficult to actually overrun that so long as you keep on using it. What you want to do then is every time a trigger occurs, read through it again and live by it. You're going to see me say live by it a couple of times here. And the reason is your chimp at the moment is living by its reason as to why it's okay to feel anxiety or feel fear. You need to live by something that says not only is it not okay, this is the correct way of living. Whenever you reach a 3 out of 10 emotion, use it. Like I said, it's very easy to squash those thoughts and emotions at a 3 out of 10 compared to an 8 out of 10. If you want, every time you do a checkup, okay, 20 minutes where I'm at, I'm only at a 1 out of 10, but I'm going to reinforce it anyway. I think it's really important to also track your progress. So in your journal, you might want to, put down a note, how many times you caught yourself, how many times you're able to resolve it, extra thoughts you had, because what you'll find is that you do this for a few days and it kind of works. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. And then you get lazy one day, it all goes wrong. You go, well, that didn't work. And instead of looking at the progress, actually I did better for 3 days in a row and today I stopped doing it, you're just going to give it up. So tracking your progress is really important. And I'm sorry about this. This is not a quick fix solution. You have to repeat it for months. And the reason for that is your chimp probably grew for years. You cannot get rid of an ingrown thought like that overnight. You just can't. It's how you have lived potentially your entire life up until this point, to an extent at least, and certainly your entire trading career. Trying to get rid of that and just replace it with something doesn't happen. So you need to keep on repeating it. You will find that on a day where you don't have great sleep, you go in, your fatigue is already a 4 out of 10, your chimp is going to thrive in that environment. And even if for 2 weeks you've been doing this really well, you might slip up because of it. That's fine. You need to understand, okay, when I'm tired, I don't do particularly well. Find a way to, maybe go for a run in the morning so that or when you've woken up, if you haven't had a great sleep, to make sure you're fully awake. Maybe it's, food you haven't eaten. Your chimp is going to thrive in that environment. Or maybe you've eaten a lot of food and you're sluggish and tired. Your chimp is going to thrive in that environment. So it's all about repeating this until you get to a point where your human side of you, this new way of living, becomes so automatic, so strong, that the chimp doesn't even get a word in. If we go all the way back to this diagram here, once we get to a point where we've replaced the chimp with the correct positive thought process, when you have a specific situation trigger, it will go to the reaction and thoughts which are controlled by this. This is all automatic and the correct response seems easy. And the great thing is, on top of this, the emotion remains lower, which means you're able to trade for better for longer. So it's very much a compounding thing. And then finally, I've got a few bonus solutions here. These are just sort of things I thought of whilst writing this and put them all on this final slide. So the number one thing I think for any mental game issue is embrace and accept it. You're not going to improve overnight. If you can go into the market and go, you know what, there's a really good chance I'm going to feel a lot of anxiety today, and that's fine because I've got a strategy to make myself a little bit better today so that in the future I'm going to be a successful trader. If you can embrace it and be fine with it and know it's going to be there, when it shows up, you're going to be more prepared, you're going to be less impacted by it, and you're going to be able to resolve it easier. If you have uncertainty in your strategy, go and understand your strategy more. Go and actually dive in, know how often you're going to lose, how often you're going to win, what a likely drawdown looks like. Get to that point where you don't worry about the result. All you do is worry about the execution of the strategy because you know it makes money in the long run. Try to think of yourself as inquisitive. Each trade is just more data. If you win or lose, it doesn't matter. It's just more data that you can gain from for the future. Okay, if you lose, you can learn from it. If you win, you can learn from it. I think it's really important if you do struggle with anxiety, prepare mentally. That can literally be 5 minutes of sitting, reading through that new resolution, and also just going, it's absolutely fine if I feel it. Like I said before, it's fine to feel anxiety today. I'm expecting it. I've got a plan for it. I'm not going to fix it today, but I just want to make a small improvement. And next point, the goal is to improve for the future. Today is successful if you make an improvement. It doesn't have to be a major improvement. You don't have to go from being this really anxious, fearful trader to the perfect trader in a day. If you make a 1% improvement, well, it's only going to take about 30 or 40 days, a couple of months, for you to be where you want to be. And the big thing as well, keep tracking it to know where you are. Build data to know when you're most likely to drop off. Right? If you know that after an hour and a half of trading, your fatigue really kicks in and you find your chimp taking over more and more, well, give yourself a 30-minute break, or maybe stop trading for the rest of the day. Maybe if there's a very certain set of situations that when you get, when you have a loss on a really volatile day, it spikes it more than ever. Okay, just be aware today, be aware that, okay, it's a volatile day, I've just taken a loss, this could be bigger than normal, maybe size down. Okay. The key thing that I want to leave you all with is you cannot fix these kind of things by just saying, just take the trade or just size down if you're scared of taking losses. Because the thing is, your performance might be better when you're taking, half the size or a quarter size or tenth the size or whatever. But if the fear is based off of the amount of money you're risking, as soon as you try to size back up again, the fear will just come back and it will just be a bit of an endless cycle. So you really need to go, what is the overarching fear? What is the overarching reason as to why it's okay to feel that fear? And you need to target that. This approach, I think, is the best one out there right now. I've used it on countless mental game issues in trading and in poker. And they have worked, I'll be honest, pretty much every time I've seen some improvement to complete change in approach. So this is an actual system that will help you resolve those issues rather than just a quick fix thing. I'm aware that this is quite long. We're coming up to almost 40 minutes of recording. I hope you have watched all the way through. If you have reached this point, thank you so much for sticking through it. Write in the comments down below what your biggest mental game issue is, and I will make more videos on this for FOMO, revenge trading, greed, all of these sort of things we'll make more videos on, so that you guys can get some more exposure to those if you'd like. If you found this useful, please let me know in the comments. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you again in the next video.